All right, thank you everyone for being here today. I'd like to welcome you again and on our final day of our festival. This is the 12th iteration of Puppets in the Green Mountains, just around the bend. This is our Access Through the Arts panel, Illuminating Converging Pathways. Thank you to our live audiences and our online audiences for being with us today. And thank you to HowlRound and Fact TV for being able to stream this for us, to close caption it, and of course archive it online so you all can either take a look, or if anyone was unable to join us today, they still get a chance to take part in these important conversations. These panels allow us to connect our audiences, our artists, the conversations being had during the performances and outside the performances, and they help those conversations to ripple out into the community and the world beyond. So we're very excited to have you with us today. I would like to thank our youth facilitator, Alex Ather, for being with us today and for leading this panel, as well as our panelists. And of course, our funders who make this festival possible. The New England Foundation for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Clues Fund, and the Wolf Kahn Foundation. We thank them profusely for their support and for your support as well. Coming to live theater, donating to live theater helps us to do what we do and to continue doing what we do. So thank you again. And without further ado, I hand it over to Alex.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. I am an actor and performer of 10 years and a human of 15 years. I'm so grateful to be here today with all of these fantastic artists. Today we have Deborah Hunt, Sarah Nolan, Shoshana Bass, Day Hernandez, Willow O'Feral, and Maria Pugnetti. So how this is going to work is I'm going to pass the mic to you guys when you want to answer a question. We have a few questions. And then for the last 15 minutes will be reserved for questions from our audience. So if you have a question, just hang it up there. So I'm going to pass you the mic to just introduce yourself and your part in the festival this year.
Hello, I'm Deborah Hunt, and along with Guido Guerrero, we performed Road of Useless Splendor, Puppeteer, Mask Maker, and Human. I'm going to take that from you because I think it's very good. And super happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Nolan, and I am ensemble member and director of Feral.
I think we all have to project a little more.
Oh. Hello, everyone. No, yeah. Yes, I know. It's for the people out there. I am the director and ensemble member of Feral, and we opened this week. It was very exciting. Had our world premiere, and a big fan of everyone at the festival.
Hello, I'm Shoshana Bass. I'm the artistic director of Sandglass Theater and the director of the festival and the creator of Feral, along with this amazing company. And I am part human most of the time. And yes, that's me.
Hola, my name is Day Hernandez, and I'm also an ensemble member and play part in the devising team for Feral. Happy to be here.
I'm Willow O'Feral, and I'm a local documentary filmmaker, and I was filming Feral 2 nights ago, and I've worked with Sandglass a lot, and my partner is a former chair of the board of Sandglass, so and I've gotten to work with Maria too, so yeah.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a technical designer that works with Shoshana and Sandglass sometimes and has been involved in Feral since its early days. And I was doing some lighting and sound and filling in for our musician Molly as the mushroom in the production. Yeah, that's me. Thanks.
It's just for recording, so you need to speak nice and loud.
Please speak up, everybody.
Okay.
Really hard to hear back. Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. So our first question is a very broad one, but you can answer it in whatever way you feel is appropriate. Walk us through your process of creating art. Are the
And keep it short.
Yep. And whoever wants to start, I'll just run the mic over to you.
I'll take a stab at it.
Yay.
All right. Starting point. Very different. Mock-ups. Very important. Testing, experiments. Very important. Test audience. Really great if you can have one. Going back to the drawing board happens a lot. Take something out, put something back. And then perform it for 2 years, and then it's done. I think.
If only it were so easy to just like do the one thing at a time. I always feel like there's so many parallel trains running at once, and before all that, fundraising. Oh my goodness! But to fundraise, you also need to have something to show that you're asking. So you have to do unpaid work before, so that you can ask for money to do the next thing. And in this country, you're also marketing all your own stuff. You're also producing all your own stuff. You're also so there's. Apart from even just making the work and the creative process, there's just all these other layers, I think, that I just want to throw in there.
Yes.
As part of that. Sarah is amazing at prototyping and taught me a lot of lessons in that. But I think there's a seed moment for each work. And for me, we were talking about scenes that were there very easily from the beginning in a show and stay the same, and they kind of contain the whole show. I think in Feral, our moment was the woman getting into the cage in the shadow was like, yes. It just happened easily, and it contained the show in it. And so sometimes those little seed moments are the most important piece of a process when you find it, and you know it's just kind of been gifted to the process and to the piece.
Yes.
I think each work is, for me, quite different. Sometimes it's very clear if there's a funding opportunity, a grant to be written, it's like being specific but very general at the same time, so that if you get it, they don't nail you down to what you said a year ago. And if it's not, it can be. And so it acts as a point of departure too, a pie forzado. Like, okay, there's a deadline, so something has to be done in that time. The other thing for me, for this show, we didn't have funding, and I decided I wanted a show that could fold. That everything, or many things could fold up. So I began to make the mask and the first costume, and also at the same time, I live in Puerto Rico, Giro lives in Baltimore, and I go there for Christmas time. So I went there and found in a second-hand shop some knitting needles and some yarn, the color of the mask I'd made. So it was like, I used to knit. I think I'll knit in Christmas time. It's a good thing, it's cold, because you don't really knit in Puerto Rico, it's too hot. So things came very piecework. I mean, very patchwork. So it was a process that we had no idea until we shared the painting of the pop-ups, et cetera, but we met I had some work in Italy, we met there to actually do the montage. And we worked on some stuff that needed to be finished, and we had everything laid out, and it was like, what are we going to do with this? Be arbitrary. First, second, third, okay, that's good enough. And then it was just layering in things, and some things work, it was very patchwork. And that's kind of how I work. I'm never too sure until the end what it is. So.
I was just thinking of something, well, I love what you said, Sarah, and really it's cool to hear how puppetry process or theater piece is similar in a lot of ways to documentary film. But I was just thinking of something that Julia Reichert said, who's one of my like lodestars in documentary filmmaking. She did a lot of labor rights and feminist documentaries, but she said, I was in a workshop with her, and she said that you have, the central part of making a piece is finding the beating heart of the story. Why are you making it? And you have to just cleave to that over and over again at every step of the process, because you can get really lost in like what is hot right now in documentary film, or what would be sexy, or what, you know, oh, I'm really attached to this one scene that you know, this shot is so beautiful, it has to go in. But if it's not working for the beating heart, then it has to go. And when she said that, it really helped me like make decisions along the way.
Echoing everything that everyone else has said, and also just adding that there is a little bit of a moment of haunting that happens, where there's a resonant image that's kind of stirring around, and then maybe you have to put it down and get back to work, and the life goes on, and then it comes back, and you're just so curious and fascinated, and then you go back and you revisit this image or this character or whatever it is that's actually. There's a little bit of a romance, I think, with me and my creative process, where life takes over, but then if there's still a little spark, I'll go back to it, and maybe 10 years later, there's still a spark, and I'm like, we've been long distance for so long, but it's time that we reconnect. And then I'll be like, maybe next week I can plan some studio time with you, and then we get back into the studio together, and then, you know, like, things get carried away, and so then, but then you have to, like, I think the crucial part is that, like, if I had it as an artist, if somebody would just, like, basically just feed me under my door, like, would just deliver things, I would be glad to be, like, in this whimsical, like, curious laboratory of development all the time. But I think what's so great as far as actually, say, bringing Feral to the stage is there's project management artists, there's accountability, there's deadlines, there's grant writing, there's administrative stuff, there's tenacity and ferocity, and Shoshana had the moment of romance with the image, and I remember, because we've been friends for a while, seeing the spark of Feral in her notebooks, and seeing the images and the drawings and being like, ooh, this is juicy. And then, but that could have just been this whimsical idea that just lived in her illustrated in her notebooks. But I think the difference between bringing something to a stage and to an audience is that you have to sort of surrender to the fact that you need project management, you need deadlines, you need accountability, you need other people. You can't just sometimes you need other people, and whether that's just having the humility to know that I'm just an idea person that likes to just be like in my studio, but I need somebody that's a very grounded person that, and I think that's what's so beautiful about ensemble work, and is that you can chart the course ahead, and you can take that romantic idea, that curiosity, that fascination, and eventually, if you have all the components together, the team that you need, the funding that you need, the space that you need, and like you handle the actual physical reality that we live in as artists, you know, like if you can manage that, you can bring something to an audience, and then without any knowledge of what's going to happen, you just show up, and then it happens, and then it's pretty magical, because people perceive something that you didn't perceive, because you've been so, you know, in the wheels of like grinding it out, and after you were once inspired, and then so that's what I would add to that, is the romance and the pragmatism that is required, and the reality that has to shape us as artists, the context that we're living in, and how we have to adapt to it, and what resources we have to source, and how much back pain we can endure.
No, I'll just add to everything. To that, I would say like I have devoted my practice to be one of collaborative processes. So the one piece that I will add to all of that when it comes to creating something, it's just coming with with your full presence, your best attitude that sometimes flips throughout the day and whatever, if you're experiencing whatever with your human livelessness or just coming there and then also trying to plug in and understanding how other people's processes are. It has been very important in my practice. So I can be, ideally I can be of service to what process it's been like, especially for people who are perhaps running with other many aspects of a production, right? If I have a niche where I'm being part of that admin process, I know what it is to be like running a bunch of hats besides the creative hat. But when I get to work in processes like this, that I get to just come and be an artist, also plugging in and trying to understand what's happening in the room and trying to see how we can be supportive of each other in trying to bring that vision that somebody, that some other people have in the room. It's something that I feel very content that I'm a part of.
Thank you so much. All right, our next question. What is the meaning of storytelling? How do you tell your story through your art? I'll let it marinate for a second.
That's a very interesting question.
Repeat the question, please.
What is the meaning of storytelling? How do you tell your story through your art?
Pipe it down. Okay, just to get the ball rolling. I'm actually pretty old-fashioned in that, like, I love Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and I think that storytelling is so old, ancient, and we are so ancient that it's always like, for me, it's very comfortable finding a story that's compelling and that I can resonate with the characters in it, and so I think it's storytelling has such a strong presence for me in my life, and I think in art, and when we're able to gather and have a collective story, we were just talking about this, where we're in a space live in person, and whether it's a fire or it's a theater, the lights come on and a world is created, and we're all able to enter that world together and emotionally experience and breathe with the characters and go on this little tiny journey in a little hour or whatever. Go on this journey together where we're all, and I think that there's something really beautiful about that just is not going to go away no matter what is around the bend. I think us being able to gather for a story in person, and that like electricity of like, I'm with people now, and like, ooh, hey, just the little charge of that, the electricity of like the storyteller and the artist showing up and being actually there in front of you. And there's a little bit of, I think it's a very old, visceral, very interesting experience that I think is not going anywhere, and I've seen that with audiences where I was surprised to think that like they could be streaming something with that's like online, but they seem to have they seem to be really shaken up and stirred up by actually showing up to a live story, to a live event. And surprisingly, like somebody will be some like really macho, no offense, I mean, macho man will be like, when I was doing a story where I had these little shadow dancers, ballerinas, and in the back, the person was like, yeah! And like, I was like, whoa, I wouldn't have expected that, but like, it just speaks to us in this very, I don't know, something really deep, and speaking of a deep intuitive thing about just being able to participate in a collective story where we're all together, breathing together, experiencing all the tribulations of the story together, and then we disband, and there's something really, I don't know, enriching about that in a whole sense way. It's not just the eyes perceiving a digital experience in a small screen. It's something that's very alive, very three-dimensional, and very powerful, and can reach people in a way that's not intellectual, beyond their own perceptions and personal narratives. Pass it back to whoever wants.
Oh, no, you go.
I was just responding to the second half of that question, which was about what stories we want to tell.
How do you tell your story?
How we tell it. Because I think it's so interesting that, okay, we have maybe an idea or a starting place that is personal to us, but we don't know what the story is. We come into the room, we're like, what? If we come in with curiosity, and it takes so much trust. And for me, that's the hardest part about a creative process, is like, okay, trust that the story will emerge as I'm working, and the story that needs to be told will emerge as we're working. And sometimes it's like, oh no, we've lost, I don't even know what we were talking about. Why are we even doing this? Like, you completely lose track of that, and then the work comes back to you with what it needed. Or listening to Zavi talk about objects, and in just intuiting stories from objects, is that we have allies all around us to find story and discover story. And what's my story when I look at this object is different than what's your story when you look at this object or this show. And that what I love about art in that way is that everyone comes with their stories. It doesn't matter what my story is. I mean, it matters to me what my story is, and it matters to the process that I have my own stories that are part of it. But that doesn't mean the audience has anything to do with that. They come with their own stories. And I think that's so exciting.
You want to add something, Deborah?
I think it depends which kind of storytelling we're talking about. Because often we think of stories, we think of something linear, and something that we've either heard before or that we've been brought up with, something that was told to us, so it's maybe verbal, something that we repeat, something has to do with memory, that has to do with continuum. And then I think when there aren't any words, another kind of storytelling takes place, because I feel that my job is to create a complete world. So if I manage to create a complete world where I'm very sure about what I'm doing in it, and that story may be linear, it may be happening on different verticalities as well. This has to relate to this later on, whatever. As long as I'm sure of it and I am believing in that world, then it's not my job to... My job is to present that. The audience will joins in and hopefully joins this world. So I'm often very confused about storytelling anyway, because I think of storytelling as more of a verbal story, oral storytelling. But I think it happens, I think the stories that happen are woven in present time. So we all have our memories of what something might be, or something touches those memories, and then because we are in present time, another thing is created. And that's the interesting story, in a way.
I just have a quick thought. What was my thought? I feel like for documentary filmmaking, I feel like curiosity and openness towards others is really what I'm really drawn to. And so in a way, it's a relief to get out of myself, talking to people, asking them questions, actually, and not just people, but animals, other life. I've been filming birds recently with Fred Homer. I'm making a documentary about Fred Homer. Some of you might know him. He rehabilitates injured wild birds. And just filming, like I filmed a pigeon in close-up a couple weeks ago, and the morning light was hitting the pigeon's eye, and it was like, looked like molten lava. And he was looking at me, and I was looking at him. I don't know the pigeon's pronouns, but I was just had a feeling maybe. But it was just like, it was this shocking feeling of being outside of myself, completely undressed in front of another being who's regarding me, regarding them. And that's where it's at for me about documentary filmmaking, and it never gets old. And then later, often in the process, like I was talking about the beating heart, I realized, oh, I'm making this film because of the generational gendered violence in my family, even though the film was about Indigenous women in the US fighting against, sexual assault and fighting for tribal sovereignty. I realized actually the beating heart of why I was making that film was really to repair harm in my family too, and that was very important. It took a couple years for me to figure out why personally I was making the film. And so that's obviously very, very personal, but the curiosity and openness and interest in reaching out towards other people is really what instigated it. So it's like curiosity towards others and personal beating heart, I guess.
I'll add something. I think, ladies, no. I wanted them to finish their side. I think for me, it's all, puppetry is so visual, and the visual storytelling comes from distilling. You're just constantly distilling, boiling it down, boiling it down. Do you really need that little flower there? Like what? And my dad was a graphic designer, and he always talked about when you're making logos, you take out, you take out, you take out, you take out, and then you're like, that's too much, you put one thing back. And I think a lot about that editing process, and as a background in film, I think talking about the heartbeat, what is the heartbeat? I also think about montage, and if you have this image next to this image, and that's what we're doing, is we're making these montages of material, right? It's like I have this material, but then it's juxtaposed with this material, and that equals the meaning. And so I think that experimentation is so important to get to that meaning that actually resonates, and for it to be a successful or to be a meaningful story, it has to be, oh, instead of, huh? I think that there's joy also in the huh moments. But even in storytelling, I use a lot of humor, and I think what I like about humor is that sometimes it can be very factual. It's either a laugh or there's no laugh. And in that way, it's landing or it's not. I think we were talking about that the other day. I don't know, with all of you. But yeah, so I think distilling and humor and to tell, and especially with puppetry, to tell stories of growth and change, I think is really important. Okay, thank you, Alex.
All right. Another deep one. What defines you the most? How does that show in your work and life? And this can be it can either be like an identity or something that's happened in your life that you feel like you still carry with you today. There's no right or wrong answer. Again, I will let it marinate.
What defines us and what's the part two?
What defines you the most, and how does that show in your work and life?
Maybe some of you could answer it for someone else that you know on the panel. Like, what defines me? That is so awesome. It feels like but you might be able to do like shoshi. Indigestion. I don't know. I was just listening. Well, you guys all know each other. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard because it's also hard to define yourself and to choose. Like, no one wants to lock that in. You want to stay open to. I like being defined by the people I surround myself with, for example. That is a conscious choice that I make now. That isn't, oh, I happen to be born in Southern Vermont. I happen to be born to. I'm the daughter of puppeteers. Yeah, they're all part of who I am, but the active choices of what we do, I think, is maybe more exciting for me because we all have circumstance and all that in our lives. So, and all of that is going to play out in our work, I think. You were just giving an example of how that plays out in your work, Willow, of where you come from. And yes, of course, we're always trying to integrate pieces of ourselves through our work. We're always trying to, I think, heal parts of ourselves through our work, or follow things that we think we need or feel we are drawn to but don't know why. And those are the things that are undefined. And I think it's actually the things that are undefined that are interesting to me.
I'll just add one thing. I think the myself part is the most detrimental to my art, because I think my ego and my sense of self, when it's involved in my art, is when I start to sabotage the work because the idea of performing it will be so humiliating to me. Why am I writing a song about squirrels? Like, how could I ever perform this? And then also bump into people at the co-op after I've sung a little ditty about a squirrel. And so I think defining myself is the thing that is most harmful to me as an artist, because I think what drives me as an artist is curiosity, is like when I see something beautiful, it's reverence. It's also, I think, when the ego gets entangled, it's like, how can I vindicate my existence as a weirdo? You know, like, if I make something really cool, then will people say, yeah, she's a little weird, but she makes cool stuff? Like, how do I make myself feel like enough? All of these things, like, how am I going to validate all of the things, the adversity or the eccentricity that I've been enduring, you know, with art? I think that's when it gets to be a real, like, it interferes with my creative process, because my creative process is sort of more about following, like, not knowing how something's going to turn out, having the courage to be able to sort of say, this is really wasteful of energy and time and resources. This is potentially going to embarrass me, all of that stuff. Like, I think the more that I can disentangle myself from the process of working and just enjoy the tempo of creating and feeling like I was born to just be working with my hands and doing stuff and working, like, just to be interested in something, a process, as opposed to the routine predictability. So I think the more I disentangle my identity with the work, the more pleasant, the more interesting it is. And that's the most challenging thing I've ever had to encounter as an artist, because it's as soon as the self comes in and says, this is going to represent me, is when I start to sabotage my creative process and make it miserable for myself. The more I feel identified with it, is the more miserable the process is going to be. This isn't good. No one's going to like this. If this is how I present. So I think a surrendering, a humility, and like kind of a sense of sort of playfulness is something that I want to cultivate in creative process, and less about me. Is that?
Oh, all right.
I could go if you don't want
You can go.
go at the same time.
We can go next. Somebody asked me in Puerto Rico, what do you feel? You're from New Zealand, but you've lived a long time in Puerto Rico. Where do you belong? You know, and out of my mouth came, I am a citizen of my work. And this is quite recent, and because it's a place where I feel most alive. It's a place where that I've inhabited, if it is a place, for a while. And it's also something that can be geographically like a tiny island or a vast plain. It can be full, it can also be absolutely barren, and it's the place where I can trust the most. And I think to me it's a rich place, and that's where I go from. Whether I'm successful or not, or people like it or not, is not the point. The work is, I don't do much else. I don't have much of a social life. I don't go to parties so much. So this is, I'm a citizen of my work. That's how I define myself.
That's lovely. I think that one thing that defines a lot of what I do is I do feel I have an ability to read a room and vibe check, I guess. Growing up, I had someone in my life who was dealing with bipolar disorder, and so that ability to go into a room and know immediately, like, the vibe, and then adjust accordingly. I think I bring that to a lot of my collaborations, and being able to be spackle. I feel like sometimes I can spackle the room, fill in the gaps, and I think what's hard then about stepping into like a director role is like, I don't know, what do you want? Sometimes. And so Shoshana was incredible because you have such strong vision, and it was really great to collaborate with you in that way, because it was like, I do have moments where I'm like, oh, okay, I know that's it. Sometimes it clicks, and we'll have really great discussions, and that was really fun for me to start to discover, like, oh, I know what I want this to be. And I think that's my challenge going forward, is being like, as I'm able to get to a place where I am creating my own work and not something that's a commission or filling the desires of a paid gig. It's a challenge. It's like, oh, I have to figure out what I want. So that's my challenge, but also a real, I think, boon to myself. So.
I'll say I was trained as an architect. I'm an architect, but I don't practice it anymore. So, but it brings a whole aspect of myself into my work, which is I tend towards problem solving, and it's also architecture is a very social art, and it's combined with science and all of that. So there's a lot of me that it's very practical and logical and structurally, like I create structure to everything, to processes, to how things move, how whatever. And then over that, I can improvise, but I do require and need that structure. And I think that part of the when I'm working in collaborative practices, I try to track that for others as well. So yeah, I'll say that.
Thank you so much. That was so enlightening. Next question. What are the risks of developing art in the modern day? One thing that might come to mind is the use of technology, as there is more advanced technology now than there was. And do you feel as though it helps your work or hurts it? Anything along those lines? We're marinating once again.
I'll just say the question again.
What are the risks of developing art in the modern day?
Can you say the second part?
What risks of developing art in the modern day? Wait. Oh, no.
You did have a second part. You said,
Oh.
the introduction of new technology, how is that?
Yes, that was more an extra nugget. You can grab onto it if you want or let it float away, whatever you so desire.
I'm sorry to I'm just buying you some time over there, okay? I'll just we were just discussing this because I think a lot of us are very hands-on artists, and I was just discussing this with the lovely Feral ensemble members. I'm very old tech, and there's certain things that I'm just not going to participate in because but I think not only am I old tech, but you're all old tech too. And so I think with the introduction of things like AI and the presence of content that's always just flooding into our digital spaces, I think it's becoming less pleasant to be online. And I have this instinct that as artists, we're still going to be here adapting, and as human beings, we're still going to be meeting. We might be even more compelled to be meeting in person, because when AI is telling you this beautiful story about a brown panda bear that is eyes darting around because that is basically compositing content in a way that's supposed to create an emotional arc for you to experience, and it feels very dead and flat, and it's just a place to space out. It's always going to be, I think, right now, if I were to go outside and space out in a natural space where there's birds and there's sound, I think it's a more restorative, and it's the way that my body is made. And so I think, I don't know how the younger generations are. I'm not long for this life, but I'm not going to be able to wield the powers of AI to make my next magnum opus, but I think I love technology. I love, because I'm somebody that doesn't have a lot of resources, I love being able to automate. I love being able to incorporate something into my little backpack that I can cart around and I can do digital projection and sound and lights all in my little workstation. Totally amazing to me. I also think that it's not going to be a substitute for the experiences that we have in our little town, and AI is not going to fix your toilet, and AI is not going to put on a wonderful shadow puppet show in front of a firelight or by torch or by stage light. I think we're still here adapting to the changes in our environments and in our economic systems. As artists, I think we've always had to be gritty, resourceful, and adaptable and endure, and as people, and I think we're still doing that. Take it away.
I don't really use AI. I know filmmakers are using it more and more. I just haven't gotten around to it. I feel very open towards it. I feel like, people freaked out about the printing press. We're going to freak out. It's okay. We'll adapt and learn. There's some really bad things coming with it and some really good things. One thing, though, I'm just really, really nice to Siri. I'm very polite, because if they do take over, I want to not be on their shit list. So say please and thank you to Siri. Yeah. And my partner made his, when you ask, is it Siri? The Google, whatever, Google Voice, whatever it is. Alexa. Well, we don't have an Alexa, but when you talk to your phone and it talks back, he made it a male voice because he worries that AI is super sexist. Well, it is, because it's input from human generated. It gets its information from the internet, which is super sexist and racist. So he had to change the voice into a male voice so that he doesn't get used to ordering a woman around, a female voice around. Yeah. And then his sister just lambasted him about it. She was like, "Oh, you won't have a woman give you the directions on your phone?" And he was like, "Ah!" But she was, teasing him. But I do think it's really weird and interesting, the gendered voices on AI and all of that, and how I've heard people speak so rude and so pejoratively to AI, to their Alexa or whatever, do this, do that. And I feel like that is big no-no.
No, I'm not thinking.
Well, I'm one of those that runs screaming in the opposite direction and is completely distrustful and terrified. And I fully accept that, and I also accept that this is something that will be integrating somehow into the world. So, yeah, and I'm interested to see how artists want to hear a little bit about the creation of how you used AI in the creation of your show. Because I think I'm still looking for the words. The tactile way of experiencing the world is all we have, really. We have this body and this way of being able to connect physically, face to face, with material, with nature, with ground. And this other thing, it's like it swirls in a place that I can't be and I don't know and I can't actually physically exist in. And so I don't know how to relate with it. And I am fearful of the danger to our imaginations and the strength of our imaginations, because I think our imaginations are required to heal the world, are required to fix the many troubles of our community that we live in, or the different various communities we live in. And we need that tool. We need that tool more than anything to keep a healthy world continuing. So I think that's the one place where I get very fearful. If we start to rely on AI to do the work of our imaginations, then we put ourselves in a very dangerous place.
All right. One thing that's important to me is to eliminate as much fear, personal fear, as possible. I don't want to live fearfully. If I make mistakes, that's fine, whatever. So during the process of this work, and it was really very knit the road, make the costume, make the mask. I will say, a gazillion years ago, we went to libraries in past companies. This is, back in New Zealand, and we took out about 20 books. And we read them, and we looked at the pictures, and we looked at these, and paintings here, and we sort of scanned a world that we thought might be useful for us in the next production. That was then. And what happened with, so this show, I was doing other projects, other shows, and so this developed very, very slowly. But the mask I had made, the costume was, the first costume was together, decided on pop-ups, decided what they were being painted when, I think it was like January of 2021, something like that, I came across Midjourney, which is a thing for AI for images. And I went, what on earth is this? And I it was a mess. It was hard to understand how to get into. But then I did understand it, and I thought, what awful stuff is coming out of it? Not to be like egotistical, but I didn't like much of the images that I saw. They personally. And then I decided, all right, I'm going to give it a go. And what I did was describe very, very precisely the masked character. And I went, so what this masked character is, a traveler, walking towards a burning city, for instance. And then out of this soup comes some images. Sometimes interesting, sometimes not. And it was just like having, because for this show, we live in far away. So it was like having a strange accompaniment. And then every now and again, I'd just go, okay, once again, the trap, because it doesn't stay still, it's constantly moving. And I'd put in exactly the same, and maybe this time it would be like, I decided to broider the end of the nose red, the beak, and with the embroidered nose, and suddenly this other kind of whole look, very, very different. So it was sort of, it's interesting. I've never used chat or writing, because to me it's not, I have enough good ideas. I think they're good ideas. If I was paid $1 for each of them, I'd buy you all everything you ever desired. But, so I'm not interested in content. I know I'm confident in my own generation of content. Now, the interesting thing, like playing with this as I was creating things, is that off and on for years, I've made wings. And I have this idea of fabulous wings. And then the folks who do, what's it called? Cosplay. Wow, fantastic wings. These people can make, and I'm going, damn, my wings are always funky and whatever. And I wanted this character, one of them, to have wings. And so I put in exactly the same words, more specific, more just like the character, and out come the wings that you saw in the show. That's the only thing that's actually come directly. It was like I saw it and I went, this is it. These are the wings. I can make these. They can fit inside a thing. It's not going to be Mission Impossible. They're portable. They look like us. And so that, to me, that project, then, I mean, we started rehearsing and I haven't looked at it again. So to me, it's an interesting thing. It's beyond our grasp already. It's moving, it's developing. I'm not interested in it for writing essays for myself or descriptions. Occasionally I might. The newer versions of it are horrible. Everything is now perfect. And I like the old versions when there was 8 fingers and strange things like that. I like that version. I don't like the new versions. But it's kind of like, to me, I wouldn't use it to write anything, because I don't find, doesn't occur to me to do it. Probably I'm vaguely interested to see what in video comes out, but not even that so much, because I like other people's video, but it's a taste thing. But I mean, when they developed the Moog synthesizer, everybody said that's the end of music. It was people threw up their hands in horror. So I'm more worried about the use of that technology, not in the creative, but in fact, surveillance, war. That to me is super, super terrifying. So.
I wanted to mention that last night, earlier in the afternoon or something, we went to see the Shan's Shadow show. And besides it being a really beautiful show, we have in Puerto Rico, we have a lot of power outages, like so consistent. And I think you brought it up last time when it comes to thinking of how to keep creating work, but also work that you can present that is not highly dependent on lights and sound, and like that it's alive and that you can actually put it out without worrying about that. I was really moved by that piece last night, because I was like, we've done shadow puppet shows in the street when the students are on strike, and it took me there. Like, there are many ways of keep doing this work that it doesn't rely on all that tech. Not to say that really it moves things quickly, or it makes. I cannot imagine necessarily at this point Feral without the lights and without the sound, because it really creates a mood, and it let us move in the stage in darkness or this or that. But that it keeps in my problem-solving brain, it's always like that. We're having so many issues back home when it comes to access, or when it comes to power-related issues, that how to continue creating that is not so highly dependent on technology.
All right, now, unfortunately, we are out of time for these questions. but we do have time for about... Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi. Shoshana, I noticed in the festival program, I think in your festival director's note, there was a mention that your welcome note was written in collaboration with some AI. So I was wondering what the extent of that was and how that was used in your choice to do so.
Thanks, Alex. We have the same name.
Yeah, so the whole festival, as many of you might gather by now, we have themes for our different festivals, and this year's festival is themed around the relationship between new technology and organic knowledge, and how one might inform the other or threaten the other, or whatever this new thing where it might be going and taking us. And so in the spirit of trying to be truly in this investigation of this festival that I'm presenting, I opened ChatGPT and I said, all right, let's give it a go and see what it did, and tried it out in the spirit of, it was so interesting because I was writing in prompts about it, and if I were writing it, it would be like, oh gosh, very kind of cautious about the road ahead. And ChatGPT kept writing things like, puppetry is all about the meeting of new invention with old tradition, and was celebrating that puppetry itself really is a place that invites new technology and has always needed technology or innovation in that way, and so ChatGPT kept framing it in this very positive, collaborative light. And I found myself in a weird, oh, interesting point, ChatGPT. I really didn't think about it that, you used the word innovation and instead of new technology. Interesting. I wouldn't have used that word for what you're doing. So I was in a learning experience outside my comfort zone. I think I even put a note that it was something I was resistant to as I was writing it and figuring out what I would take and what I would leave. So that's where that all came from, as a way to try to be authentic in what we're exploring here, and have my own little mini exploration in terms of the welcome letter for the festival.
I think I remember seeing Adrian Kohler from Handspring Puppet Theatre in South Africa, the people who did Warhorse, in a lecture, and he said, I might get the century wrong, we are 15th century state-of-the-art technicians. So at some point somebody said, I'm going to pull a rope and this will go up, and I'm going to push this and this will do this. And I think technology has always been developing. So we are still using a very pull a rope, push a thing, flip a something or other, up comes a thing. And this is just other technology, some of which is super useful. Then, as Day says, the lights go up, the light goes out. We have this in Puerto Rico, as she said all the time. You can't use anything unless you have a generator, which I don't. So
you're back to pulling a thing.
I'm pulling.
Yeah. I know. I was gonna say, besides QLab, I think the best piece of technology we put into Feral was when we put casters on the dress.
Yay! Yes.
That was great.
Another question from the audience? Oh.
Okay, all right. For the camera, you'll have to excuse me. This is me and my own curiosity, so thank you for letting me step in. There's been a lot of conversation about courage and curiosity and creativity, and I see each of you as innovators in your own right. And I've been reading a lot. In fact, there's an NPR article about it, but the new idea of people have fight, flight, and freeze responses, but there's a new one that's kind of entered the arena, so to speak, affiliate. And I feel that in a lot of this conversation about creative affiliation, technological affiliation, how do you see yourselves as, I guess, artistic affiliators in terms of how you see or value collaboration as we kind of round the bend? I think that's kind of the through line that I'm hearing in some of these conversations, and I'm curious if you could speak to that or if you feel anything in that.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of nepotism. Is that what it is when you just hire your friends? But it's like, but in a good way, in a good way. I'm gonna flip it. Well, hold on. Lights go out. This idea of the like, and I think in networks, and especially the puppetry network, can feel very small sometimes. And then when we meet people, we bring them in indie, and then they stay in, right? But you know, I think when you're in ensemble and when you're with affiliates or colleagues, I think especially in this experience, I really wanted to bring my A game, right? Because we're all going to be around in this world, and we want to bring our best for each other. So I think that's the challenge. Is I get to challenge myself, because if I'm working on my own thing, it's the accountability that Maria was talking about. I see how hard Maria's working. It makes me want to work hard. I see this collectively. We're building this show, and we're so invested. And I think having that affiliation with each other and that passion for the work is so wonderful to be around. And then I get to take that energy into the next ensemble work. Or, I think Day and I were talking about, you learn new processes with each other, and then you take what you learned there, and you take those processes to, the next group effort. And I think that's really lovely. And also you build a trusted network that way. And I think but nepotism is bad. It's on the record.
Strong finish.
Yeah.
Strong finish. Very good. Okay.
Thanks. I'm curious, Deborah and Shoshana, I feel like creating something and then also performing in it is a very particular problem that a lot of puppeteers have to figure out how to manage, how to see the thing while they're inside it. I'm just curious what tactics you used while creating these pieces.
Serendipity, mostly, I'd say. We don't work with a director. Maybe that's a not good thing. We don't use mirrors. Sometimes we might step out and go, oh, that looks awful. Let's change this. But I think it's also just a sort of trusting game. When you know what you're working towards, and you have I think something important is a development of what is the frame. Maybe this is more of a cinematic thing. What is in the actual frame? What are people seeing? And what was the question again? God, this is happening to me a lot.
How do you stay outside and be inside?
And then, okay, so building's one thing. Building is, yes, it's a very distinct thing, but the montage is the exciting thing to me. And that process, for instance, for us, it was 1 month solid of working day and sometimes nights to create the montage to actually rehearse the show. So it fortunately happened and came together actually quite joyfully and quickly, and we just said, we'll take feedback. My thing is just, if people want to give me feedback, I'm super open to that. I just trust that it's going to be, you know what? And I think it was Beckett who said, you fail, get up, try again, fail better. And I think, that's trial and error.
Yeah.
Just to say one thing on that level that we were talking about yesterday at the cabaret is that scientists can do things like build a whole crazy expensive rocket ship, and then the launch happens. They spend zillions of dollars on it, and it goes up and it explodes. And everyone's like, yeah, that's an advance for science. That's growth and progress. And if you see one bad puppet show, the person's like, oh, terrible, I'm never going to talk to them again. Like, completely canceled right away. And there's such different standards between science and art when it comes to failure. And I think that's a very important thing to mark, that our relationship with failure is something we need to really look at as a field. But that wasn't your question. I just needed to respond to that. I do work with a director. I think it's very important to have someone on the outside, because even now with Feral, I have no idea. We're like inside a dress. We're rolling around a ladder. Like, there's no idea what's going on the outside. There's many moving pieces, and I really can't see it when I'm inside. And I think a director's mind, to be in the space of making those kind of decisions and facilitating that frame or what we're looking at, is a different mind or a different body to be in than a performer's body, who's really there to be ready and to make choices and to make propositions and be completely embodying the performance of it. So I can't do both at the same time. I mean, we tried a lot, and I don't think it doesn't serve the process as much. And it made me think about how you and Brad work when you're filming, that you kind of break it apart like that too. You have a director and someone on camera. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, with Brad and I my partner Brad and I make our films together, and we met on a film crew like 12 years ago, and we just have filmed together a lot, so often, Brad has like long professional cinematography experience, so by default, often he ends up being more on camera, and then I'm more in a director-producer role, but then we both like to take each other's roles on as well. So sometimes we'll both be filming together, and we'll just be looking over at each other, and I'll be like, oh, he's on a close-up on Shoshi with the puppet, so I need to be stepping back to get a wide, and it can become like, when it's good, when we're on our game, like it's like a dance, and it's really fun and beautiful that way. But sometimes, like Brad, if he, like we spent a day with them filming handheld camera during their rehearsal run-through to get some shots that we wouldn't be able to get when they're performing to an audience, because we were getting kind of up in their face and stuff. And Brad was getting like, you're doing the wolf dance. Oh my God, the footage is so beautiful of you doing the wolf dance. It's so spooky and beautiful and cool. And so much, it's very dynamic to watch as an audience member in a live performance. But if I'm just to film it wide angle, like the whole stage and Day's dancing with the wolf, it's not compelling. But when Brad is filming close up with Day, like dancing with Day with the wolves, it is so gorgeous, and I feel like it gives you it's the filmed version experience of the performance, and so it has to be, to make it unless it's just a straight archival kind of shot of like, this is how the stage looked during the performance, that's one thing, but to film it in a way that makes you feel like you're watching it, that's what we were trying to do with I don't know if that was...
When and where do we get to see the film?
It's going to be a promotional video, probably 3 to 5 minutes, so that Feral can get booked at other venues and stuff. So I assume it'll be on the website and everything. Probably in like a month or so.
And with that, that is our panel. Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you guys for your wonderful responses. Do I hand this off to someone?